And for this part of the presentation, it's called Supporting Neurodiverse Learners. And we're going to start with the Universal Design for Learning Principles, something that's global, not very specific to necessarily neurodivergent student. But then we're going to go into Dr. Maya Matai's presentation, following mine, to talk about specifics of how to support students who are neurodivergent. And she's going to go into some stats and information about different types of neurodiversity, and then some tips for students as well as mentors and instructors. So we shall get started. So just briefly about myself. I'm a learning disability specialist who has worked with students who have learning disability, who are neurodiverse for, 2-3 decades. And I'm a Japanese native. So my English is a second language, and I'm a second language learner. So sometimes I can get my words mixed up and twisted, even though I've been using English for many, many years. I do have some visual challenges. I was born with a cataract and astigmatism and a kind of an undeveloped eye. So sometimes if I'm squinting or am I trying to really see you hard, because I cannot really see you very well. So bear with me. If you approach me and then waving, and if I don't recognize you, it's because of my eyesight. And I have a lot of interest in STEM education. I'm just always have been interested in how people learn, especially the interaction of how your brain develops and also how the society is set up. I'm also interested in transition of students with disabilities in STEM pipeline, culturally responsive teaching, meaning I'm interested in how the local context should be utilized in teaching and learning. And also use of assistive technology. I think earlier Scott mentioned about AT, and I brought some AT, or my colleague from Japan at the University of Tokyo has brought AT for some of our participants to test it out today. And if you are interested in trying as well, come at the end of the symposium and then we can show you some of the ATs. And I'm also a mother of 3 children, who are 4, 9, and 12. They're very diverse, and so in teaching them or finding an activity, I have to find something that will engage them all at once. I don't want to do 3 different activities, right? So that is kind of a universal design of learning principle, to kind of think, how can I engage all my 3 kids at the same time? While they learn something at different levels and the way they learn. So objectives of today's presentation is to learn about Universal Design for Learning framework, understand why UDL framework is helpful in removing barriers and creating access and maximizing inclusion and success in learning. And then we'll see some examples of how UDL framework can be incorporated into school and employment settings, and which I think Dr. Arnold Jensen and later with Lisa and Patrick will be presenting more about as well. So I'm not going to go too much in detail there. So in order to think about it, there are 4 questions. What is UDL? Where does the concept come from? Why is it important? How do we use UDL framework? So let's just go over the definition quickly. So what is Universal Design for Learning? I just want to see maybe if you know UDL really well and you think you're an expert in UDL, please put a open hand palm on your chest. If you think you've heard of UDL and you kind of know about it, then put a fist on your chest. And then if you don't know anything about it, don't put anything on your chest. So I can kind of see. So if you're an expert, a palm, open palm. If you're somewhat novice UDL, put a fist on your chest. then I can kind of see you. That's an easy way. And I see a lot of people who didn't put anything. That means you're new. That's great. I see a lot of you who has a fist. That's great. Now, I don't think with my eyesight I can see any like expert in this room. Phew! Because then I can teach something. So universal design for learning is a proactive way to approach learning and teaching. It is a framework and not a strategy in itself. There are tools based on this framework that can help in making our classroom more accessible to all students and to have our students become an empowered learners. So at the core of this framework is to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn, how we learn. And Scott mentioned a lot about the neuroscience of learning, right? So this universal design for learning is based on how we learn. At the core of UDL framework is the belief that learners are variable. I think you can see each other that we all vary, right, in different ways, sizes, skin color, everything, but also in our brain, we vary a lot. So where does UDL come from? The concept and language of UDL was inspired by the universal design movement in architecture and product development, originally coined by Ron Mace, at North Carolina State University. Universal design is a design that's usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. It's a thinking that everybody can utilize. And what does that mean? And this is a typical example, and many of you may have heard it, but it is what explains this concept the best. In the United States, and because I know some of you are not from the United States, we do have what we call sidewalks, where people walk on the side so that you don't get hit by the car. And actually in Hawaii, we might not have sidewalks, so it may be a new concept. But for the sidewalks, if you go on the sidewalks, you need to be able to get off the sidewalk or go onto the sidewalk for the wheelchair users. So initially, these curb cuts, or where the sidewalk has a little ramp, are made for maybe a person who uses a wheelchair. Who actually benefits? Have you guys used the curb cuts, the ramps? I have. I'm a mom of 3, and I always have strollers. I always travel a lot with a lot of bikes. My kids might ride a bicycle, a skateboard. So I've generated this AI picture. It's a stick figure of people crossing this the sidewalk, right? And where there is a curb cut. So there's a stick figure on a skateboard and a person on a wheelchair and rolling a luggage. But that is universal design. It maximizes the opportunity for everybody to use the design that allows for different variation. And universal design can be looked at as a continuum. And I have an assistive technology device that's a microphone that's attached to a little, fitted ear, hearing aid look-like device, and so that the person can hear my voice clearly. So UD can be thought about as a continuum, and we sometimes in the disability field, we call it the curb cut effect, because we can apply this in many different design of products. So the one of the very left side is the doorknob, which you actually require a lot of force to rotate the door. And it's not easy for little kids or elderly or person who might not have had usage, right, to open a doorknob. So the next level up may be a lever, and lever handle is a lot easier to open and use. And then there is a bar where you don't even need to push it down, right? You just pull and push. And then the next level of design that's more used by everybody is a push button. And someone with a wheelchair or someone who has a lot of luggage, everybody can use the button. And then finally, the last one is an automated sliding door. And even a dog can walk through the door without any issue. So it's usable by everybody. And I know, actually, Scott had a dog, and we have a dog here too. So the universal design has these 7 principles, which I'm not going to go into in detail, but it is thought about in design as equitable use, so everybody can use it, flexibility in use. It's usually simple and intuitive, perceptible information, so it's easy to understand. Tolerance for error means there's some room for error and low physical effort, size and space for approach and use. And I'm just going to show a few other examples of universally designed products, which you may have come across. So the drinking fountain with different height, and those who might need a water, but just drink or pour water into a water bottle to drink. There's this picture of a scissors that's can be used for right-handed or left-handed. So I know if you prepared a science classroom with only right-handed scissors, but those with left-handed, users may not be able to use it as well. But this scissors allows for both dominance. Perceptible signs. Most people understand easy signs. That's an escape route. And then I mentioned about tolerance for error. And nowadays, I use this a lot, or maybe in Word document, there is an undo button, or like a redo, undo, redo. These are tolerance for error, and it's thought of as a universal design. And then here's also a picture of a desk that can change the height for different users. Like for this podium is set at same height, which is really challenging. There is no average height. Scott's a lot taller than me, and I have to hunch over. It's not really like a appealing presentation style, but forgive me, this is like I have to bend over. So how does universal design itself benefit the community? Universal design values a range of human ability, diversity, equity, and full participation. It promotes best practices and does not lower the standards. Everybody can still drink the water, right? Raw from the water fountain. Everybody can use the table with different heights. And today we do have some tables at the back for you who want to stand and work versus just sit and work. UD is proactive and can be implemented incrementally, as I showed you in the doorknob. And universal design benefits everyone and can minimize the need for accommodation. But it doesn't mean that accommodations are not needed, but it welcomes everybody into the same location or same place without need for specific accommodation or specialized accommodation. The accommodations are still very important, but it allows for a minimal accommodation. And it can save costs in the long run. To retrofit an elevator or a ramp in a building is very, very costly. So if you think about it from the get-go, it costs a lot. It will save costs a lot. So this concept can be applied to learning. And that's where the universal design for learning is coming from. And it is knowing that the learner variability exists. We all have different fingerprints. Are we all unique, right? So let us hear from casts.org, or people who have coined the term universal design for learning, about what they say about learner variability. And I'm going to pause here and hope that I can play the video. And I might need a tech assistance here. Hold on just a second.
You cast.
Great, thank you. So as you saw in the video, or you heard in the video, variability is the term used to describe how unique and varied we are in how we learn. It really means that one size does not fit all. We have that experience of clothes, right, that says free size, but it really doesn't accommodate everybody, and it doesn't fit the way that we want it to fit. And we always, in casts, they often show shoes, and because we know in your classroom, people have different size shoes, there's no average size, and that's really visible, so we acknowledge that people can have different size shoe. But often when it talks about brain or something you cannot see, then we don't really acknowledge that there are variation in how we learn. Learning variability is thus a recognition that all students differ, and learning science research shows that these differences matter for learning. So here is this is the UDL framework that is based on CAST, and there are three components, or it's based on like three main parts of the brain that addresses. First, it addresses the engagement, the why of learning, which is the affective network process information, and where you regulate emotions and influences why we are motivated and engaged in learning. And it's really important. If the students are not understanding why they need to be in the class, or why they're learning, or they're engaged in their learning, they're not going to be as motivated and want to explore the different opportunities within your classroom. The second, or the purple, is the what of learning, and it's the representation, which offer information in more than one format. So recognition networks receives incoming sensory information, including what we see and what we hear, and these networks are the basis for what we want to represent. So how the information, or what the information we're learning. And then the last one is the how of learning, and which is the action and expression. This is the strategic network and direct how we respond to what we're learning. And these networks will be the principles of what the students can be, how they could be goal-oriented, or differentiate the ways and how they can express what they learn within your classroom, whether they may express through writing or speech or acting. And let's go a little bit further. And I'm gonna show you some simple Rubik Cube. Do you know what this is? Have you all played with a Rubik Cube? Yeah. And I love Rubik Cubes. I like to play with them a lot. It's fun. But you know, it might not be for everybody, right? And for those who are blind, the colors are difficult to see, so we can make it a little more universally designed, but is this really universally designed? This is a Rubik Cube with Braille. What do you think? Can you play a Braille Rubik Cube? It's pretty exclusionary. Like, it's very specific to a target group of, okay, I'm gonna accommodate you and make a Braille Rubik Cube, but it might only be for a really small group of people. So we can make a Rubik Cube that's more universally designed. And this one, which I happen to have as well, so you can play with it, has a different tactile texture and a color. And it's also is a lot easier to move around than a traditional Rubik Cube. So you don't need much effort in turning the cube around. But even so, this one it's much more universally designed, but it might not engage some people in doing Rubik Cubes still. So I'm gonna take this step further. And there is an online Rubik Cube where you can, if you want to play an online version, you can take the QR code or type in the URL. It's fascinating. You can see the solutions. You can increase the number of squares. You can turn it around. You can look at the answer and then work backwards. And then you can try out with the actual physical Rubik Cube. You can work in pairs. You can increase the time. So there's a whole lot of things you can do with this online version of Rubik Cube. So imagine if you're creating an activity that is to learn about Rubik Cubes, there is a multiple option. You can actually provide a physical Rubik Cube. You can have people work in pairs using an online version. You can even test it with a Braille Rubik Cube, and so on and on. So there's a lot of ways that might engage a learner. So let's do a little bit of an example, so what that means for engagement. So for providing multiple means of engagement, again, this is the why, the affective. Maybe you can look at your brains later to see which part of the brain, right? It's the inner part of the brain that really brings your emotion of what you want to do. And the key question to consider here is, does the lesson or meeting that you're in provide options that can help all learners sustain effort and motivation, regulate your own learning, engage and interest all learners? So how does it look in a school university setting? So maybe in a traditional classroom, students sit at their desks, work on assigned tasks or model work, and engage with mainly the teacher or professors, right? In a UDL framework and thinking of engagement, students will be able to complete the task in the way that they learn best. As in the Rubik Cube, if the task was to learn about Rubik Cube, you can do the actual physical Rubik Cube, but maybe the online. There's various ways. They may use a computer to type responses instead of in a notebook. They may focus on a few topics that are particularly applicable to their environment instead of doing it all. So in this workshop, we have a note takers, and note takers are not an accommodation for only those with disabilities. You might have been so tired from flying all the way to Hawaii, or you just want to engage in coloring the brain, right? Or doing something hands-on. So we have a collaborative note, and if you take the QR code, and you can see that notes have been taken for this symposium, and it will be shared later. And I didn't mention it earlier, and I should have mentioned, because anybody can contribute to this notes. So if you're a good note taker, or if you want to review it later, if you're the presenter and say, hey, that's not what I said, I'm gonna fix it, you can do that as well. So this is a good way for people not needing a specific note taker for your accommodation. Everybody can access it. There are times when we're sick, tired, not healthy, and we really cannot take notes or cannot focus too well, and this will help you. Multiple means of engagement still in an employment setting. Traditional employers are maybe required to work in a certain way or a certain time with very little flexibility and creativity. So UDL thinking might consider why your employees want to work for your organization. find what talents or interests they have, and provide opportunities where they can share. Consider flexibility to increase productivity. Now let's talk about representation. What? Recognizing the what, kind of the back of your brain. Thinking about how information is presented to learners, the key questions to consider here is, does the information provide options that help all learners reach higher levels of comprehension and understanding? Understand the symbols and expressions, perceive what needs to be learned. And what does it look like? In school, traditionally, maybe classes may be mostly lectures and reading from textbooks. The alternative way will be showing videos, which we had some glitches, but we were able to make it work. Doing hands-on activities we've already had in the morning with the pipe cleaners and brain making. Going on field trips, which we cannot do today, but we can go on a field trip about universal design for learning. Listening to audio, inviting speakers, using cartoons, etc. How can we represent in an employment setting? So traditional maybe employment orientation may be only one day in person with presentation, and the employee may reach out to the presenters to see if transcripts from their presentation can be shared later. But instead, we can have the presentation recorded, video caption, handouts and events, and offer recording and materials in print and digital format to all. So then they could have a self-paced orientation. And in fact, we do have a recording of this symposium where you can go back to the website that will have been provided and you can review it. So there will be the notes, the recording, the handouts to make sure that you are able to digest some information from our symposium today. And finally, multiple means of action and expression. It is the four-part frontal lobe of the brain, right? Think about how learners are expected to act strategically and express themselves. Key questions to consider here. Does the activity provide options that help all learners act strategically, express themselves fluently, and physically respond? So how does it look like? In a school or university, maybe a traditional assignment may be a paper on a topic, and rubric is not readily available, and grading may be unclear. We've all had that moment, I don't know why this professor took some points off, right? Paper has to be done alone and cannot do it in a group or in pairs. In a universal design learning framework, there could be a choice of paper or a presentation to allow demonstration of your knowledge. Rubric is clear, provided in advance, so you know what the professor is expecting. There is a clear feedback that is provided. So you know why you had your points deducted or why you score really well. Paper or presentation can be done as a group, but it may be done alone if you prefer. In an employment setting, tradition may be that employee may need to submit a quarterly written report only to their boss. I think it still happens a lot like this. But employee in a UDL framework thinking may be able to share the report orally, this is my English as a second language comes, present the results with the team instead of only a written report. Employee may be allowed to use speech-to-text software as an assistive technology device to enter reports orally into a computer. So to sum this up, and it was a very short presentation to digest all the information, but I want to make sure there's enough time for Maya to present her part. So to sum this up, the UDL framework is not a framework for a specific group of students. It is a framework with a core focus on learner variability. knowing that there is a diverse group of students in your classroom or in your employment setting. And by creating a classroom or work learning environment with UDL framework in mind, we can have all students, including those who are neurodivergent, to gain better access and engage with their own learning. The ultimate goal of utilizing a UDL framework is for the individual, right? Is to be able to make their own best decision on how they learn best. So it's important that it's not just a change in instruction or instructional environment. It is also about the student and you as a learner to know how you learn best or how you engage best with the materials. So as you walk away from this symposium, think about your own learning style or what motivates you most. So if you want to, I'd like, as we switch speakers here, if you're instructors or employers, maybe jot down one thing that you will try next week that has some universal design for learning framework in mind. And if you are students or parents or caregiver, please jot down what kind of activities motivate you or your child in learning. And you can do that on a piece of paper. I think you all received a blue bag that has a sticky notes inside, so you can utilize that to jot one thing down. Or you can also collaboratively share in a Jamboard. There's a Jamboard here, what you want to be doing next week. And I'm going to switch over to Dr. Maya Matai. Thank you.